The 56th session of the Senate in the second regular session of the 16th Congress is hereby called to order. Senator Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. will lead the chamber in prayer. Senator Marcos.
Let us remind ourselves that we are in the presence of the Lord. Lord, we come before your presence to praise and glorify your most holy name. With great yearning and urgency, we join your humble servant, Pope Francis, in his supplications. I ask God to give us more politicians capable of sincere and effective dialogue aimed at healing the deepest roots and not simply the appearances of the evils in our world. Politics, though often denigrated, remains a lofty vocation and one of the highest forms of charity inasmuch as it seeks the common good. Conflict cannot be ignored or concealed. It has to be faced. But if we remain trapped in conflict, we lose our perspective, our horizons shrink, and reality itself begins to fall apart. In the midst of conflict, we lose our sense of the profound unity of reality. When conflict arises, some people simply look at it and go their way as if nothing had happened. They wash their hands of it and get on with their lives. Others embrace it in such a way that they become its prisoners. They lose their bearings, project onto institutions their own confusion and dissatisfaction, and thus make unity impossible. But there is also a third way, and it is the best way to deal with conflict. It is the willingness to face conflict head-on, to resolve and to make it a link in the chain of a new process. Blessed are the peacemakers. Today, Lord, please touch our hearts that we may see you in others. Touch our minds that we may work for the welfare of our brethren, and most especially, touch our souls that we may share their pain and alleviate their torment through our loving concern and action towards the upliftment of their lives. It is only through this sacrifice that we can truly claim to be your children, working for your mission here on earth. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Senator Marcos. The Estribillos de los Escolares will lead the chamber in the singing of the Philippine National Anthem, after which they'll render a song entitled Ako ay Pilipino. Thank you to the Estribillos de los Escolares Choir for that rendition of the Philippine National Anthem and the song entitled Ako ay Pilipino. The Secretary will now call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan Peter Compañero S., Cayetano Pia S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito Enrile, Escudero Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Po, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar. Senate President Rilon.
18 senators are present. The chair declares the presence of the quorum. The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 55th session, 18th of February 2015, and consider the same as approved.
Any objection? Hearing none. Motion carried.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading Senate Bill number 2486 under Committee Report number 91. This is the Carriage of Foreign Container Vans Bill, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration of Senate Bill 2486 on third reading is in order.
Mr. President, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and record the whole text thereof.
Secretary will do so.
Senate Bill number 2486, an act allowing foreign vessels to transport and co-load foreign cargoes for domestic transshipment and for other purposes.
Mr. President, copies of this measure as approved on second reading have been distributed to the members of the Senate last February 17, 2015, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6 of the 1987 Constitution, and thus we are ready to approve the measure on third reading. And thus, Mr. President, I ask for a roll call vote.
The Secretary will conduct a roll call vote.
Roll call vote. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan, Peter Compañero S., Cayetano Pia S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Honasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Po, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar. Senate President Rilon.
18 affirmative votes, no negative votes, no abstentions. Senate Bill 2486 is approved on third reading.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Secretary will read the reference of business.
Bills on first reading. Senate number 2659, titled an act granting additional survivorship benefits to police officers who have been injured or fell in line of duty. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Public order and dangerous drugs, education and culture.
Senate number 2660, an act increasing the bed capacity of the Northern Mindanao Medical Center in Cagayan de Oro City, amending for the purpose RA 7938, appropriating funds for federal purposes. Senator Gingona III.
Health and demography, finance.
Senate number 2661, an act increasing maternity leave benefits from 60 days to 120 days or 4 months, amending for the purpose PD 442 amended by RA 7322 by Senator Trillanes IV.
Labor, employment, human resources development, civil service, government reorganization.
Resolution number 13, entitled Joint Resolution extending the term of the Congressional Oversight Committee on Agrarian Reform, COCAR, until December 31, 2006 by Senator Nasan II.
Agrarian reform.
PS Resolution number 1182, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct integrated legislation to report the number of premature babies in the Philippines is increasing at an alarming rate. Senator Defensor
Health and
Santiago.
demography.
PS Resolution number 1183, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the report that the MILF is selling firearms taken from his lane SAF policemen for 1.5 million. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Public order, dangerous drugs.
PS Resolution number 1184, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the recent COA report that the DOH failed to properly utilize funds that were intended for calamity relief assistance in 2013. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Health and demography.
PS Resolution number 1185, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the recent COA report more than 2 million pieces of compact fluorescent lamps bought by the government in 2013 cannot be fully accounted for. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Finance.
PS Resolution number 1186, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the recently released GO report that the National Livelihood Development Corporation failed to liquidate 7.615 million in priority development assistance funds released to non-government organizations, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Accountability of public officers and investigations.
Yes, Resolution number 1187, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation, the report that the passing rates for the licensure examination for teachers have been alarmingly low from 2009 to 2014, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Civil service, government organization, education, arts, and culture.
Yes, Resolution number 1188, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation, the report that the most highly elevated bridge in the Philippines is in danger of collapsing, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Public works.
Yes, Resolution number 1189, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation, the warning issued by the Philippine Overseas Employment Administration against fake online job offers in Japan, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Labor, employment, human resource development.
PSR number 1190, congratulating and amending Police Officer Neil Perez for honoring the Philippines with 2014 Mr. International title at the Interburgo Hotel Ballroom in Ansan, South Korea on 14 February 2015, Senator Lapid.
Rules.
Yes, Resolution number 1191, directing the appropriate Senate committees to conduct an investigation in aid of legislation on the reports that accessories purporting to be Lucky Charms sold in Manila contain toxic chemicals with the end in view of enhancing regulation of these products, Senator Lapid.
Health and demography.
Communication letter from the BSP transmitting to the Senate copies of the following certified and authenticated BSP issuances in compliance with RA number 7653, memorandum numbers M2015-7, 8, 9, dated 26th January 2015, circular letter number CL 2015-04, dated 29 January 2015, and circular number 869, dated 30 January 2015.
Banks, financial institutions, and colleges. The majority leader is recognized.
Mr. President, some administrative matters. On January 27, 2014, the Senate in plenary approved the primary referral of Senate Bill number 2082, and this is the act declaring rice smuggling as act of economic sabotage, prescribing penalties thereof and for other purposes to the Committee on Ways and Means, while the secondary referral was made to the Committee on Agriculture and Food. And Mr. President, with the consent of the body and concerned chairpersons, I move to switch primary and secondary referrals so that upon approval of the motion, the primary referral will be to the Committee on Agriculture and Food, and secondary referral would be Committee on Ways and Means. I so move, Mr. President.
For the record, that's consistent with the rules on the jurisdiction of the various committees. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, similar request. On January 26, 2015, the Senate in plenary approved the primary referral of proposed Senate Resolution number 1127, which is the resolution directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the reported rampant smuggling of agricultural products in Zamboanga City and their disappearance from the custody of the Bureau of Customs. This was to the Committee on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship, while secondary referral was made to the Committee on Agriculture and Food. And so, Mr. President, with the consent of the body and, of course, the concerned chairpersons, I move that we switch the primary and secondary referrals so that the Committee on Agriculture and Food will have the primary referral, while the Committee on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship will have secondary referral, Mr. President.
For the record, and to set the proper ruling, the referral to Agriculture Committee as a primary committee is consistent with the rules, and therefore it is the primary committee in this particular resolution, the secondary committee being the Committee on Trade. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, with the consent of the body and concerned committee chairpersons, I move to transfer the referral of House Bill number 2698, entitled An Act Declaring the Municipality of Talaingod, Davao del Norte as an Eco-Cultural Tourism Zone, establishing for the purpose the Talaingod Cultural Heritage Village, providing for its development and appropriating funds therefore, from the Committee on Tourism to the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources. I so move, Mr. President.
Is that consistent with the rules, Mr. Majority Leader?
Yes, Mr. President, it is.
Being so, approved.
1 minute suspension, Mr.
1
President.
minute suspension.
Right, Mr. President, ready to resume?
Sorry?
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, I move that we transfer Senate Bill number 2622 under Committee Report number 102 from the calendar for ordinary from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders.
Any objection? Hearing none, so transferred.
With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider Senate Bill number 2622 under Committee Report number 102.
Any objection? Consideration of the measure is in order.
With the permission of the body, I move that the Secretary read only the title of the measure.
Secretary will read the title of the measure.
Senate Bill number 2622, an act amending the Republic Act number 9367, otherwise known as the Biofuels Act of 2006.
I move, Mr. President, that we recognize Senator Esmeña to sponsor the measure.
To sponsor the measure, Senator Osmeña is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise to present for the approval of the Senate Bill 2622, entitled An Act Amending the Republic Act 9367, otherwise known as the Biofuels Act of 2006. This is covered by Senate Committee Report 102. President Aquino has declared an imminent shortage in the supply of electricity in Luzon, particularly during the summer months this year, and has asked Congress for emergency powers pursuant to Section 71 of the Electric Power Industry Reform Act of 2001, better known as the EPIRA, so that he may find ways to expand the supply of electricity or bring down demand through certain measures. It is in this context that your Committee on Energy is sponsoring Senate Bill number 2622, which seeks to exempt natural gas plants from the biodiesel requirement when they use their alternative fuels. They use their alternative fuels, Mr. President, only when the Malampaya field is closed down for maintenance or repairs. This amounts to about 10 days a year, and every 3 years, it's the long maintenance of 30 days. This measure complements Senate Joint Resolution number 12, which is currently in the period of interpellation, insofar as it augments generating capacity for the Luzon grid. The maintenance turnaround of the SPECS Malampaya onshore natural gas platform, set from March 15 to April 14 this year, would result in the total cut-off of the supply of natural gas to the 3 natural gas-fired power plants in Luzon, that is Santa Rita, San Lorenzo, and Ilijan, which has a total installed capacity of 2,700 megawatts. To ensure continuity of generation supply during said period, these 3 power plants would again have to use alternate fuels, with Santa Rita 1,000 megawatts and San Lorenzo 500 megawatts running on liquid condensate, and Ilijan 1,200 megawatts using biodiesel. This measure is timely because KEPCO Ilijan, through its Vice President and Plant Manager, Mr. Byung Yong Lee, has reported that only Block 1, or 600 megawatts of the Ilijan plant, would be using alternate fuel and would be available, but at a limited capacity of 420 megawatts instead of 600 megawatts, owing to the lower combustion of biodiesel vis-a-vis pure or neat diesel. As a result, and further taking into account delays in the commissioning of committed power projects, as well as the increased levels of unplanned power station outages, the Luzon grid is projected to face inadequate contingency and operating reserve capacity during the summer months of 2015 and 2016. a solution to augment the power supply by at least 250 to 300 megawatts during the periods of Malampaya's natural gas supply shortages would be to allow natural gas plants in the Batangas province to use pure or neat diesel as their alternative fuel. To achieve this objective, however, would require an amendment to Section 5 of Republic Act 9367, otherwise known as the Biofuels Act of 2006, that would exempt natural gas plants commissioned before Congress passed the Biofuels Act. The proposed amendment is on Section 5 of the Biofuels Act, and it will read as follows. An insertion that provided that natural gas power generation plants built before 2006 may use pure or neat diesel as their alternative fuel during shortages of Malampaya natural gas supplies. In the course of our hearing on the proposed measure, the Department of Energy manifested its support as it addresses the need for sufficient power supply, including reserves, especially during the summer months. The measure also clarifies that the exemption is purely for natural gas-fired power plants during times of natural gas supply disruptions. Meralco has also welcomed any additional capacity coming from the Ilihan power plant and the first gas plants because the output of all natural gas plants account for 60% of Meralco's power supply, and thus any additional capacity would benefit the electricity consumers of Meralco. I am pleased to note that during our hearing last February 9th, that the first gas, which has two plants, can also run on liquid condensate and naphtha without any reduction in megawatt output. Further, when the three power plants, namely KEPCO, Santa Rita, and San Lorenzo, run on pure or neat diesel, the cost benefit of using a cheaper fuel will be passed on to the consumers as these plants do not earn from their fuel. We also take note of the manifestation of Mr. Peter Morris, chairman of Chevron, and his concern about the unintended consequences of what he considered as a very positive amendment. With a 70 centavo difference per liter between a 2% biodiesel blend versus pure or neat diesel, there could be a situation that non-biodiesel volumes find their way into a retail transportation market, as there is a massive economic incentive to do so. In this regard, we added an additional paragraph in Section 5 which states, provided, however, that the DOE, which stands for the Department of Energy, shall ensure that the authority granted herein shall only be availed of directly or indirectly by natural gas power plants fed by Malampaya. Likewise, we consulted with the Philippine Coconut Authority and clarified that the amendment will be permanent since the natural gas power plants will continue to rely on alternate fuel for another 15 to 25 years. And there are new natural gas plants that are going to be constructed that would be using supplies from the Malampaya field. The intent is to optimize existing assets and to bring down the average cost of electricity for the benefit of the consumers. We likewise invited the Worldwide Fund for Nature, WWF, Climate Change and Greenhouse Gas Inventories, Greenpeace Philippines, Foundation for Philippine Environment, Mother Earth Foundation to address whatever environmental concerns they would have on the measure, but none of them have showed up, and it seems that they have no objections. The immediate approval, therefore, of this measure is therefore earnestly sought. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Osmeña. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2622 under Committee Report number 102.
So suspended.
1 minute suspension, Mr. President. Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session resumed.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2626 under Committee Report number 98. This is the legislative bill on the local housing board, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Resumption of consideration of Senate Bill 2626 under Committee Report 98 is in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we close the period of interpolation last February 18, 2015. I thus move that we open the period of committee amendments.
Period for committee amendments is in order.
I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator J.V. Ejercito, Mr. President.
Senator Ejercito is recognized.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. President. First amendment would be under Section 3, definition of terms. Letter A, page 2, line 15 thereof. Delete subdivision and change it with housing to read as follows. Balanced housing requirement refers to the responsibility given to developers of housing projects pursuant to Section 18 of the Urban Development and Housing Act of 1992. The rationale, Mr. President, to conform to the other definitions included in the bill.
Any objection to the proposed committee amendment? Hearing none. Approved.
Next amendment, Mr. President, page 3, under Section 3, definition of terms. Letter I, page 3, line 19 thereof. Delete the word further. Rationale, it is an enumeration. The sentence should be continuing. That's all, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
Next amendment, Mr. President, under Section 3, still on page 3, definition of terms, letter M, page 3, line 33 thereof, after the word problems, insert the phrase including the mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction and climate change in development processes to read as local shelter plan refers to a general framework that effectively provides a step-by-step procedure by which cities and municipalities could formulate solutions to their housing problems, including the mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction and climate change and development processes. It shall include measures to enable cities and municipalities to plan and implement their specific mandates based on the UDHA and to facilitate a linkage with comprehensive land use plans as defined under this Act. The rationale, Mr. President, the inclusion of the phrase is to address the demand for disaster risk reduction and climate change provision in laws in order to cope up with the changing times. That's all, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
Next item for amendment on page 4, under Section 4, local housing boards, creation, composition, letter E, page 4, line 15 thereof, delete the word N and change it with or to be read as the city, municipal engineer, or its equivalent as member. That's all, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
Next item on page 5, section 6, under section 6, demolition and eviction clearinghouse, page 5, line 35. Delete the letter A to make the paragraph a general statement. Delete the letter A. That's all, Mr. President.
Objection? Hearing none. Approved.
And last committee amendment, Mr. President, is on page 6. In the same section, page 6, line 16, delete the letter B in the same paragraph, line 20. Delete employees of the judiciary and change it with sheriff to read as before undertaking evictions and or demolitions that will affect underprivileged and homeless urban or rural poor dwellers, the city or municipality concerned, national government agencies or other proponents or eviction and or demolition activities, including the sheriff, shall submit a compliance report to the local housing board. The rationale, Mr. President, the deletion of letter A and B is for the reason that the paragraph should be a general statement, and the phrase employees of the judiciary is too broad and general. That's all, Mr. President.
Objection? Hearing none. Approved.
Mr. President, I move that we close the period of committee amendments for Senate Bill number 2626 under Committee Report number 98.
So terminated.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2626 under Committee Report number 98.
Consideration measure is suspended.
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Tuesday, February 24, 2015.
Session adjourned until the 24th of February, Tuesday, 2015, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.